Hi everyone, welcome to Advanced Statistics for the Social Sciences. In this lecture, I'll give you a review of some concepts related to research methods and statistics that will be important for this statistics course. So let's start off by talking about why research is important. Oftentimes, we learn things and retain knowledge based on our personal experiences or intuition. Other times, we gain knowledge from other experts, authorities, or even traditions. So for example, in New Zealand, the Maori people didn't have a written language until a few hundred years ago. Their entire cultural history was oral and was passed down from generation to generation, only by word of mouth for almost 1,000 years. And finally, we also gain knowledge from systematic experimentation, most often using the scientific method. And that's the type of research that we're going to focus on now. So to understand the scientific method, we first need to understand the concept and the goals of science. So a science, such as biology, astronomy, or social science, is a body of established knowledge. Another common definition of science you can see right underneath here is the observation, identification, investigation, and the theoretical explanation of natural phenomena. So researchers and statisticians like myself, and like many of your other professors, are all considered scientists, in that for our work, we are constantly testing different theories so that we can update or advance these theories based on our results. The goal of our work is theory advancement. In order to test our theories, we conduct research studies. These are the steps to follow to conduct a research study developed based on the scientific method. So here, this figure on the right of the screen actually shows the steps of the scientific method. And you can see that the steps to conducting a research study are quite similar. So now we'll go through these steps of conducting a research study using an example that I have designed. Step number 1 is having a research question. So there are specific characteristics that define a good research question. One characteristic is that the question is specific enough that it can be answered with one or several research studies. So we don't want our questions to be vague. We want to have specific ways in which we can test our questions. Relatedly, another good characteristic is that it would be feasible to create variables that can be used to measure constructs of the research question. So is the research question directly testable through variables that are relatively easily accessible? So for example, I might wonder if in the US and Canada, one group of citizens has better life satisfaction than the other. And here my population would be all United States and Canada citizens, and I'd have to sample from this population for a research study. After I have a research question, then I'm ready to conceptualize that question by stating my hypothesis. So first, I should have a clear understanding of what variables are important in my research question. My hypothesis should also explicitly state the relations between the groups or the relations between the variables of interest. Also, if I think that there is a positive or negative relation among the groups or the variables, it needs to be stated in the hypothesis. That's when we decide if we're going to make our hypotheses directional or non-directional. So once I have made these judgments, then I can form my research hypothesis. So continuing with this country example, I might hypothesize that people in Canada have higher life satisfaction than people in the US. The next step is to operationalize the research question. So once I have my hypothesis, I need to describe exactly how my constructs will be measured. So for example, I could use the satisfaction with life scale, which obviously measures life satisfaction, and decide to give my participants 5 questions from that particular scale. So I am operationalizing my variable of life satisfaction using 5 questions from this scale. Related to this, I need to decide how I'm going to design the study and collect the data. So there are many types of studies to choose from. which we'll talk about in the next lecture. And in this example, I would use a correlational study and collect the data from participants via an online survey. And then after I've collected the data, I get to analyze it. That's the most fun part of the study. Your data analytic approach depends on the primary focus of the study. So you might be interested in group differences, or you might be interested in relations among two or more variables. Different analyses are used for each focus, and we'll be talking about both ANOVA and regression this semester, which fall under the same umbrella of the general linear model, also known as GLM. So in this example, a dependent samples t-test would be appropriate for testing for group differences in life satisfaction. Then, after I conduct my analyses, I determine my conclusion and I publish my results. We use several measures to determine significance of our results, including p-values, effect sizes, and confidence intervals. So in my example, let's say that I ran a one-tailed t-test and that my one-tailed t-test was significant. I would conclude that Canadians do have more life satisfaction than Americans. And then once I have my conclusion, I can write up my results for publication. So often, once I have my study conclusion, a bunch of other questions arise that I could further investigate with future studies. So for example, I might ask why people in Canada have higher life satisfaction than people in the US. There could be many different variables contributing to this difference that I didn't include in my first study, and I could look at those in later studies. This concludes the first lecture on research studies. In the next lecture, I'll review types of variables, types of samples, and types of research designs.